Hello everyone! So today I want to introduce myself to a new crowd, the D&D crowd. I'm a relatively experienced DM. I've ran, at this point, I think upwards of 20 campaigns, both for close friends and perfect strangers, and I think that over the past close to 10 years, I have amassed quite a bit of experience in D&D 5th edition. I understand how to create worlds that people enjoy exploring, I understand how to create encounters, and I understand how to create characters and how to help people create their characters. So, for that purpose, I am now starting a series on the channel where I explain my process for how I create my campaigns and my worlds and my settings and all of these different things. Today, we are going to be talking about how to create a village. So, if that is something that you would be interested in, make sure to like and subscribe, so that you can, in fact, catch future videos. If you have your own request for a video that you'd like to see me make in the future, make sure to drop it in the comments, and I will make sure to put it ahead of other things that I might be planning. But, with all the YouTube speak out of the way, let's get right to it. Today we're going to be talking about how to create a village in D&D. Now, before we start actually creating the village, you need to understand why a village is formed. Usually, a village is formed out of a community. The community might be seeking shelter, or they might simply be placed in a specific land for the purposes of exploring natural resources, such as a local mine that might have iron, or silver, or gold, or anything else. Keep in mind that in a setting such as D&D, exploring gem mines is extremely valuable. So, procuring something like that would definitely be something that a king in a fantasy kingdom would want to do. So, let's understand what you need in order to start a community. You need three things. You're going to need a source of water, you're going to need a source of meat, and you're going to need a source of income. Now, a source of water can be anything from a river or a lake, basically anything that has fresh water. A source of meat is basically a nearby forest that has game. Most D&D being based around European folklore, this is going to be something like deer, elk, rabbits, boars. Sometimes you might even get some wolves or some bears, which, funnily enough, actually doubles as a threat to the village, which, maybe a pack of wolves gets taken over by a worgen, so now you need adventurers to come and save you. Oh no, or maybe werewolves, It creates conflict that your adventurers can then interact with. Finally, you're going to need that source of income that I mentioned, which is going to be farms, the mine, maybe it's a village that produces a certain item, like weapons, clothes, shoes, you name it. It's up to you to decide, but this is something that you need to decide before you start creating your village. Next, you need to understand that for a community to form, certain things are critical for its long-term success. Namely, you're going to need 3 buildings. The tavern is critical for the community to survive because at the end of a long day's work, you kinda want a beer. Not to mention, most taverns do double as inns, which allows travelers passing by to stop and rest, which also allows them to spend some of their hard-earned money around the village. Secondly, you're gonna need a smithy. Now, the smithy is critical because villagers need nails, villagers need tools, and villagers need weapons. Basic weapons, just a short sword or a knife or an axe to chop down trees or to, hit a wolf that attacks you, or, God forbid, some goblins that decide to attack the village and the village guard is nowhere to be seen because he's, drunk at the tavern. Now, I mentioned travelers stopping by and spending their money, and for that, you're gonna need the general store. General store is, of course, not just for travelers, it's for villagers as well. But it is still an important place to have in your village. Once you've created these 3 main buildings, now we can start expanding your village center. You've got the core, let's build around it. So, what are some ideas of buildings that you can have in your village center? You can have an apothecary for potions and herbal remedies. Maybe there's a mage that moved into the village because, he wanted to be far away from the city, but he didn't want to be completely isolated. He likes the rural life, and so he lives there and he provides arcane advice and the occasional service, and If someone happens to attack the village, now they have to deal with a mage on top of everything else that lives in that village. Most villages also want to have a church, maybe not in the village itself, but around the village, so a priest is nice, and if the church is inside of the village, it can also double as a school. Most priests being well-learned and knowing their letters, they can teach the village children the skills that they might need to, maybe, someday in the future, be more than just village folk. Depending on the type of village and the localization and, how dangerous the village is, you might also want to have an adventurer's lodge. An adventurer's lodge serves two purposes, kind of. It gives you a place for your players to hone in on. Like, you immediately know that your players are going to want to go to this lodge so that they can contact other adventurers. Maybe there's an adventurers guild that, they might want to exchange some communication with for the purpose of, looking for contracts or getting paid. And it also lets them have some interactions with some veterans of the profession in your setting. Who knows? Maybe they're old characters from a previous campaign can be communicated with through such a building. Do keep in mind that an adventurer's lodge is only really relevant in a village that has a lot of trouble or has a lot of adventurer traffic. It wouldn't make sense to, have an adventurer's lodge in a backwater village that sees an adventuring party maybe once a year. Wouldn't really make sense, right? You can also add specialty shops like a baker, a cobbler, a fletcher, a tailor, weaponsmith, stables, all sorts of things. Anything that you feel like would add important variety for your players to explore. Maybe your players are looking for horses, and so now you have a stable. Maybe they're looking for new weapons. That's the weaponsmith. Maybe one of your players is a ranger or an archer of some kind, and they need a fletcher, somebody who will make arrows for them. The baker's always nice, you can get some cakes, you can get some bread, all sorts of stuff. And the cobbler is also very important. You need shoes. Tailors too, the mages deserve nice clothes too. And don't forget, if your setting is a little bit more Renaissance than it is medieval, you might even have a gun store or an inventor's shop. Something to let your players know that the aesthetic is closer to steampunk than it is to, Euro fantasy. Now, remember, only the first three buildings I mentioned, namely the tavern, the smithy, and the general store, are essential. Everything else is optional, but it does add flavor. Once the village center is built, you now have to build up the outskirts of your village. For this, you're going to need farms, making barley, wheat, corn, any grain you can think of is a very common and easy to produce crop that can be processed and then sold at a profit, whether to a baker or for tax purposes. Because let's not forget, taxes do exist. Just because you as an adventurer are a bit of a deadbeat and don't pay them doesn't mean other people don't have to. And don't forget, most farms do a little bit of animal husbandry. Most people have a cow or a pig or something, right? And then, they breed that cow or pig so that they can have meat for the year. Beyond the farms, you're gonna need a mill to process the grain, and it also kind of serves as a watchtower. Most villages only really need one mill, but they tend to have two, sometimes three, depending on, how much efficiency you need. And these do serve as additional watchtowers because they tend to be far away from the village and out on a hill where you can actually see the land beyond the village. You're also going to need a lumber mill, probably close to the forested area so that you can cut the wood, process it, and then sell it to the villagers for, all the reasons that you might need wood, namely construction and heating. Keep in mind, electricity doesn't exist in most settings, so you kinda need it for warmth. You don't really want to deal with the winter without a little bit of extra warmth. You're also gonna need a hunting cabin somewhere in the outskirts. Some place where the hunter can bring his kill so that he can process it. Processing a kill basically consists of taking out the pelt so it can be worked into leather or just sold for warmth, and cutting up the meat so that it can be distributed to the village for selling, or just, maybe he just gives it out for free to his friends and family, who knows, right? It's up to you to decide what this guy does, but keep in mind, this is his living. He's gonna need to sell the meat. You can also use the hunting cabin as sort of the headquarters for a ranger. Rangers are protectors of the countryside. They function almost as rural paladins, guardians of the village folk and the wild as well. They tend to be friends with druids, so, this also serves as a point of communication for your players if they stop by. If you stop by a village, you ask, hey, what's happening around here? Maybe they say, oh, the ranger. He said something about some dangerous animals out in the field. Maybe you want to talk to him. You can find his cabin over there. And now your players can go and have a conversation with this ranger and see what he has to say. Now that we've done the basics of actually building your village, let's talk about the people. A village can have anywhere from 100 to 1,000 people. Most of those would work on the main source of income for the village. This is either going to be farming, but some villages, like I said before, can be dedicated to making specific products, such as weapons, clothes, pastries, coin, etc., whatever. Usually, the culture of the village is going to be defined by whatever their main source of income is. If a village is known for its pastries, you're probably going to see a lot of bakers. You're probably going to see every single house in that village smelling like pastries. And that's going to be a really nice place to be. Who knows, your adventurers might even want to retire there. So that's a good place for you to burn down before they get a chance to. Gotta keep them on their feet. Other than that, if it's weapons, they're going to be very proud of their weapons. Clothes, they're going to be proud of their clothes. If it's, meat stuffs, etc., etc., etc. The closer to the village center, the more well-educated these villagers are going to be. And the further away, the less. People at the village center are probably going to have 1 or 2 kids because their job is going to be working the store. Or, in the case of the priest, assuming in your setting priests are allowed to have families and raise kids, in the case of the priest, it's probably going to be working the church, learning the word of God, learning how to use divine magic to heal people and do all sorts of things like that. People close to the outskirts, farmers, hunters, millers, miners, woodcutters, hunters, etc. Did I say hunters twice? I said hunters twice, didn't I? Would tend to have larger families, since kids do count as free labor, and you kind of need the extra set of hands as you, grow older and your back starts hurting, not from disease or from damage. I guess damage, but it's kind of harder to fix continuous damage from labor. Although I guess a cure wounds might fix that too. Who knows? It's your fantasy. You get to decide how realistic it has to be. Now, keep in mind, very few adults in a village are going to be unmarried. Getting married and having kids is part of survival. It's also pretty fun. Finally, you have the guards. Now, guards are a bit of an interesting character. In most historical settings, a guard would be a man-at-arms, somebody who serves the king and who is sent there to both keep an eye on the village and also keep them safe. Sometimes they're recruited from amongst the villages and they are trained by the local lord who is a knight. In a fantasy setting, guards can be a little bit more fantastical. It can just be somebody whose father was a soldier, and so he's decided to take up a weapon in order to defend his neighbors. Let's call him Larry. Larry's a strapping young man. He's handsome. All the ladies love him because, well, he's 20 years old, probably unmarried because he lives a dangerous life, and so he doesn't really have the time. He spends it practicing swordsmanship. Granted, he doesn't have much formal training, so he's not the most skilled combatant, but still he's better than most villagers. And his job basically consists of scaring off any goblins that come too close. If an owlbear were to show up, it's Larry's job to round up all the villagers with whatever comes close to weapons that they might have. So, pitchforks, spears, the occasional sword, and drive away the owlbear, and walking people home when they're too drunk. Honestly, that's probably like 90% of the work. Just, babysitting drunk people. Now keep in mind that a village's population is heavily dependent on its structure. A village with a very large center is probably going to draw a lot of travelers, it's going to draw a lot of people who are going to want to live there, and so it's probably going to be closer and closer to that 1,000 people margin. And at that point, you're kind of almost a small town, more so than a village. A dying village, where the land has become barren over time, the mines have dried out, travelers aren't really passing by at the rate that you'd need to keep the economy alive, that would probably have a dwindling young population. More and more of the population would be old. But keep in mind, a village can be healthy at any size. You can have a dying village that has 800 people in it because, those people are 50 and 60 and 80 They're getting closer to the end of their lives, and their kids have moved out. There's maybe a handful of children in the whole 800 people village. And at the same time, you might have a very healthy 200 people village because, you know, it's got a good spread of young, middle-aged, and old people. But the bottom line, and the thing that you need to keep in mind is, more shops and businesses usually means more people. Population scales with activity. More activity, more people. Very simple. With all that done, you've finished your village. Now let's just hope no necromancer decides to kill everyone and revive them as zombies for his army of the dead. Ooh. I hope you guys enjoyed. I do enjoy talking about D&D. It's one of the things I'm really practiced at. It's a thing I love doing. I love telling stories. I love creating these stories. And so I kind of wanted to share that with you guys and just show you a little bit of the inner workings of my campaigns and maybe help improve your campaigns as well. If you have advice, share it. If you have suggestions for future content or just requests, things that you would like to know a little bit more about, let me know. With all that being said, have a good one. Cheers.